Renee Umberger and Summer Kupau-Odo, another name you'll hear again, argued that fish abundance on Hawaii reefs is declining, which is true for food fishes, but not for aquarium species. Although they might define the term decline differently than we would. They also argued that allowing vast numbers of marine animals to be exported and sold for private profit without any scientific assurance of sustainability should never have been allowed. Now, once again, they may have a different definition of sustainable than the way it's defined by conservation biologists. I was given the opportunity to argue on behalf of the fishery and pointed out that the Hawaii aquarium fishery is sustainable and that there's significant data to back that up. And also, and particularly because of the huge reproductive potential of yellow tangs and other reef species to quickly replace fish that are collected. We sometimes look at it as like a bank account. The capital, the brood stock, is not touched. The interest that accumulates are the fish that are collected for you for the aquarium trade, and that interest continues to accrue. If well-funded national organizations can work with local activists in Hawaii to shut down one of the best managed inshore reef fisheries in the world, that's acknowledged by scientists and fishery biologists that the West Hawaii aquarium fishery is one of the best managed inshore coral reef fisheries of any kind of fishery in the world.
Is with us to explain what it all means.
With a few clicks of their mouse and the payment of a $50 fee, they could obtain automatically a permit that would allow them to take unlimited numbers of our reef fish and wildlife for exportation and sale in Hawaii and throughout the world. Be informed of all environmental impacts before they make decisions, before they authorize private activities, and in this case, the mining of our public resources for private profit. DLNR's history, its refusal to engage in the environmental review process for decades now. HEPA has been on the books. Again, it's our cornerstone environmental law, and this agency, which is under a constitutional and statutory duty to conserve our resources, to manage them properly, it had a duty to comply with this law, but it refused to do so. And given that history, my clients, I think it's hard to have any faith that they're going to do something.
If I talk to somebody from DLNR, I'm betting they wouldn't describe it as a refusal. What would they describe it as? What would their explanation be?
I think their explanation, interestingly, has not been a lack of resources. I haven't heard that. Their explanation has been that, out of thin air, that it's sustainable, that we don't have to manage this fishery because it's sustainable. But conclusory, unilateral statements such as that by an agency is precisely what HEPA forbids. They have not prepared a document or done a study that is anywhere near comparable to that required under the Environmental Policy Act. A process of collaboration, public participation, transparency, right? Its own reports. And looking back to 1998, the State of the Reefs report, there DLNR concluded that studies are necessary at that time if the aquarium collection is to continue. And more recently, in a report in 2015 to the legislature, it found that fish are significantly depleted in areas the trade operates. A number of species have failed to respond to the no-take areas established to protect them, and they've actually decreased since 1999. So, we're very concerned. We believe, even though those numbers show, hundreds of thousands of fish being collected each year, we believe it could be much greater. And we could be talking the millions of fish stripped from our reefs every year now for decades.
The discussion generated as many questions as it did answers, so our producer, Ryan Finnerty, called the Department of Land and Natural Resources Division of Aquatic Resources Administrator, Dr. Bruce Anderson, to get the facts on the aquarium industry in Hawaii.
So, Bruce, I'm looking at a report that the Department of Land and Natural Resources submitted to the state legislature in 2015, and it shows an increase of 22% over the past 40 years in total catch. Earth Justice seems to be making the claim that we're not taking into consideration the overall populations of these fish. Is that an accurate statement, or is the department actively managing these the populations of these species being taken?
No, that's not an accurate statement, and I think they should know a lot better than that if they've ever looked at the data. We've collected data for over 17 years from over 6,700 surveys and found that aquarium fish populations are generally stable or increasing in West Hawaii, where, again, most of the aquarium fish are collected. The populations of yellow tang and coley, which are the two most heavily collected species, are not declining. In recent years, they've both been increasing, both in the protected areas and in open areas. What's, I think, being confused here, perhaps even intentionally, is that the resource fish, the fish that people are eating, are declining. But the aquarium fish, the fish that are the subject of this case, are really the data we have, and we have very good data on this. As I said, it was as good as anywhere in the world, shows that the fish populations are stable or increasing.
So you would say that specifically with aquarium fish, the population and current practices are what could be considered sustainable?
No question. As you define sustainability as the numbers remaining the same and or increasing, then they're sustainable.
Okay, that gives you people who are actually in this whole big mix. You've heard from both of them now. A brief history of the aquarium fishery controversy. So here are some comments from a workshop sponsored by Sea Grant at the University of Hawaii on this issue. And I'm going to read some of the comments made at this workshop. Dr. John Randall, the preeminent ichthyologist of our time, said, "There are some who feel the aquarium fish collecting in Hawaii should be banned. I do not agree with this view. The populations of these fishes are enormous, and the catch of the collectors is insignificant if we consider the populations as a whole. The answer for both sides, those who want to stop commercial fish collecting and those who wish to continue it, is the development of more marine preserves." And Dr. Leighton Taylor, who was the director of the Waikiki Aquarium before I was, made these comments based on initial surveys that he conducted. "The results of our study for 5 species in the Kona area showed that little impact was being made on Hawaii reefs as a result of aquarium fish collecting. One way to solve the conflict would be to exclude areas from any harvesting." And finally, Dr. Bill Walsh, who's been the leader of reef fish monitoring surveys on the West Hawaii coast, said, "Public awareness over the possible harmful effects of aquarium fish collecting is increasing. Emotion over this issue is intense, and the anti-collectors are strongly critical of the reef rapers. Dr. Taylor's study must be regarded as only an initial step in answering some of the questions. It is necessary, indeed imperative, that further studies be conducted." Okay, that was back in 1978. 40 years ago, this issue has been controversial. But it was recognized at that time that more protected areas and research would be needed. So we've gone back 40 years. I'm going to skip through the next 20 years and note there were attempts nearly every year at the Hawaii State Legislature to shut down the aquarium fishery. All of those attempts failed. The legislature in those years was apparently not interested in putting people in the aquarium fishery out of work and had confidence in their Department of Land and Natural Resources that it was performing its duties to protect the resource and the environment. Finally, in 1998, landmark legislation was passed to bring groups together to establish a management plan for the aquarium fishery along the entire West Hawaii coast. I'm going to review this in some detail, so pay attention because later you'll be hearing that none of this ever happened. You're going to hear that DLNR has no management plan, has not conducted research, and has not involved the public. You're going to hear that in an audio clip in a few minutes. But here's the truth of the matter. First, let me familiarize you with the 5 main Hawaiian islands in the Hawaiian archipelago: Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, Maui, and the Hawaii Island, also known as the Big Island, where the volcano has been rather active. I think it's shut off at the moment. The Hawaii aquarium fishery is centered on only 2 islands, Oahu and Hawaii Island, and 78% of the aquarium fishes come from Hawaii Island. So I'm going to focus most attention on Hawaii Island fishery. Act 306 of 1998 led to the creation of the West Hawaii Regional Fishery Management Area. It extends 147 coastal miles from Upolu Point in the north to Kalei at South Point. Act 306 required that more than 30% of those 147 coastal miles be set aside as fish replenishment areas. They're known as FRAs, fish replenishment areas. These FRAs are a critical part of this plan, so keep FRA in mind. And also understand that FRAs are only closed to aquarium fishermen. You can still enter FRAs to catch fish for food, but fortunately, fish like the yellow tang is not a food fish. Unfortunately, Achilles tangs and Collet are food fish. Other areas that are completely closed to all fishing are designated as Marine Life Conservation Districts, or MLCDs, many of which existed prior to 306. And the open areas are where aquarium fish collecting is allowed. This act also required evaluation of the effectiveness of the management plan in cooperation with the University of Hawaii, and the act required substantial involvement of the community in management decisions. The West Hawaii Fishery Council convened June 16, 1998, under the aegis of DLNR and Sea Grant, with 24 voting members and 6 ex officio agency representatives from DLNR, Sea Grant, and the governor's office, and 4 aquarium representatives were members. Almost a year later, after intensive work, on April 28, 1999, the public was invited to hear this fish replenishment area plan, which consists of 9 separate areas comprising 35.2% of the West Hawaii coastline, and it included the MLCDs, the Conservation District. So this sets aside 35% of the coastline where no aquarium fishing is allowed. This photo represents only half of the people in the room that night. There were 860 people in the room. It was one of the largest public hearings on a natural resource issue in the state of Hawaii. And 93.5% of 876 responses that night were in favor of this FRA plan. Following this public approval, the FRA plan was incorporated by the Department of Land and Natural Resources into an administrative rule. It was signed by Governor Cayetano on the 17th of December, 1999, the end of that year. And that's really 1999 was everything begins. The creation of the West Hawaii Fish Council and the Fish Replenishment Areas Plan has been the focus of a number of in-depth reports and scientific case studies, making it one of the most intensively studied community drive management efforts in the state of Hawaii. The creation of the WHFC is entirely attributable to the volunteer commitment of its members. These community members have contributed thousands of hours of time at no cost to the state. And these efforts have been assisted by the Hawaii Community Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, Community Conservation Network, the Malama Kai Foundation, the Harold Castle Foundation, and all of the individuals listed in this slide who have participated in thousands of underwater surveys since 1999. The West Hawaii Regional Fishery Management Area is monitored at study sites along the West Hawaii coast. The surveys began in 1999, right after the approval. There are 9 fish replenishment areas, the FRAs, where no aquarium fishing is allowed. There's 8 open areas where fish collecting is allowed. And there's 6 marine life conservation districts, which are control sites for the scientific study, where no fishing of any kind is allowed. 23 permanent transect sites were established, covering all of the FRAs, the MLCDs, and the open areas. Each of these transects, a belt transect, is 25 meters in length by 4 meters wide, and divers will go over and count the densities of all fish and some invertebrates, which are visually estimated along each transect. These transect surveys are conducted 4 times a year, and as of last month, I got an update. 8,512 transect studies have been completed, representing the cumulative efforts of 77 survey divers. A requirement of Act 306 from 1998 was the preparation of a report to the legislature every 5 years detailing the results of the management plan and surveys. This is the most recent report presented to the legislature in January 2015. Dr. Bill Walsh, who heads the Division of Aquatic Resources in West Hawaii, has spearheaded the management of efforts and these underwater surveys. I'm going to let him speak for himself, and actually he should be here because he's done yeoman's effort on this to get this work done. I'll let him speak through this video.
By examining the patterns of abundance and through time, we get a really good feel for the overall sustainability of the fishery. But that said, we also are looking at and monitoring the other species which can be collected. And one of the recent initiatives was to limit in West Hawaii which species could be collected. We developed with the West Hawaii Fishery Council what's termed a white list of 40 species, and these are species that tend to be more abundant. They're not the rare, uncommon, highly valued species. So we can look at what's going on with those. But going back to yellow tang, you can see this is a result. This is a kind of a mock-up of the data of since 1999 in the three different kinds of areas: the MPAs, which were long protected, the FRAs, which became protected back around the beginning of 2000, and then the open areas. And you can see that all of the areas have increased. Looking at the most recent couple of years to the previous years back in time here, the FRAs, the population of yellow tang, have gone up by 72%, and even the yellow tang populations in the open areas, which are the ones that are being collected, have increased by 31%. So it's very significant that all of the areas that are increasing, not just the areas that are closed. And when we created this whole network of protected areas, we envisioned it as serving as a model for what happens if you institute a fully protected no-take area. And even if the second most collected species, and this is the figure showing that's very even more dramatic increases: 56% in the marine protected areas, 47% in the FRAs, and a 54% increase in the open areas. And the population of both these species have increased by millions of fish over that period of time. Unique things about the aquarium fishery is it is the most intensively managed fishery in Hawaii. It's also the economically most valuable inshore fishery. It exceeds.
There's no outcry from anyone about photos like this, which are a daily occurrence at Honolulu fish markets and completely legal. A cooler full of dead Achilles tangs for food is apparently acceptable. A live one for an aquarium is not. It makes you wonder, are they really interested in protecting the species or just shutting down the aquarium fishery? Snorkel Bob and his supporters know that people will watch this video and will believe every word of it, because there's no effective counter-media campaign geared for the general public telling the true story, that in fact, all of you really do care for your fish in aquariums and do an excellent job keeping your fish alive and healthy. Let me play the trailer to The Dark Hobby.
This is a Hawaii treasure. This is Hawaii culture. This is who we are. And they're stealing it. It's like cut flowers, but this is marine wildlife. Now, you need two things to be an aquarium collector in Hawaii. It's a pulse and $50. It's a gold rush here. They're coming from all over the place to take our fish. At any given moment, there are 27 million reef wildlife individuals in the aquarium pipeline. The pipeline begins at the point of capture, and it ends when the fish goes belly up in a home aquarium. Mortality rates are about 99% within a year of the point of capture, and that means that all those fish demand replacement, and the demand comes from the home hobbyist. That's how the system works.
Yeah, discus. Who culminated in another piece of legislation in 2017, introduced as Senate Bill 1240. This bill would have ultimately ended the fishery by allowing all existing aquarium fish permits to terminate on their expiration dates. 12 scientists from Hawaii and other states wrote to legislators urging them to vote against Senate Bill 1240. The consensus of scientific opinion is that the aquarium fishery has demonstrated through rigorous scientific methodology that it is sustainable and has caused no environmental harm. Plus, it has significant economic benefits to individuals in the state of Hawaii. Nevertheless, the bill this time was passed. Subsequently, the head of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Suzanne Case, urged Hawaii Governor David Ige to veto the bill based on the department's extensive research and data. Representatives from the industry, including myself, and from PJAC, the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council, also met with the governor, urging him to veto the bill. At the same time, the governor was under intense pressure to sign the bill into law. Ultimately, Governor David Ige decided to veto the bill, so there was a reprieve for the aquarium fishery for a few months. Then, in September 2017, the Hawaii Supreme Court issued its decision that DLNR does have to abide by the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act and conduct studies to demonstrate whether or not the aquarium fishery is having any significant negative environmental effects. What was not understood by everyone, however, and this is a critical detail, aquarium fishery permits are not issued to allow collection of aquarium fishes, but rather they allow fishermen to use fine mesh nets, less than 2 inches mesh size. Otherwise, state law, which supersedes agency rules, allows any commercial fisherman to use a net with a mesh size 2 inches or greater. Until state law is overturned, any commercial fisherman has a right by law to use larger mesh size nets. Unfortunately for the West Hawaii fishery, aquarium fishermen there also need a West Hawaii Island aquarium permit, which includes a sticker added to their commercial marine license card. Those permits and stickers are no longer being issued, so that aquarium fishery in West Hawaii is closed. Mind you, you can still catch and kill Achilles tang and kole and other species, but you cannot capture them alive for your aquariums. You kill them, you have them on your boat alive, somebody's coming to check you, kill it. Oahu and East Hawaii waters are still technically open, but they don't require the sticker, but those areas are far less productive.
Dr. Randall Kosaki, NOAA's Deputy Superintendent of the Papahanao Mokuakea National Monument.
All of the science indicates that this is a very sustainable fishery. We have almost 20 years of good monitoring data on coral reefs where fish collecting occurs. And both the fishes in the coral reef habitats and the fish collectors are doing very well. The reefs are very, very healthy. The fishery is healthy and sustainable. I would argue that we should treat this like any other fishery. It tends to get treated a little differently because they're ornamental fish rather than food fish. But really, when you come down to it, it's just another fishery. It's like a tuna fishery or a salmon fishery that has certain mathematical characteristics, like, for example, a maximum sustainable yield, which is the maximum amount of biomass you can take out of this population on an annual basis without causing the population to decline and eventually crash. So if you're fishing at that level or below that level, this fishery is indeed sustainable in perpetuity, indefinitely. And so I think there is a place in the world for coral reef fish entering the aquarium trade, because once they leave the reef, they then become the best possible ambassadors for that habitat. The people that care about these fishes care as much as anyone else on earth about the coral reef habitat. It raises awareness in ways that books and magazines and pictures just couldn't. I mean, when it comes to fishes, I love fish books. A picture of a fish is worth 1,000 words, but in many ways, a live fish in an aquarium is worth 1,000 pictures. The impact is much more visceral. It's a much more compelling image. It really does compel people to care not just about that fish in the aquarium, but the habitat that it came from and the ecosystems that it came from. So coral reef fishes alive in aquaria, doing well and healthy, are one of the best ways to raise awareness about coral reefs and one of the best ways to inspire people to consider conservation measures. And these aquariums, they're distributed well inland, well far away from coastlines, away from coral reefs. They will make people think about the coral reef habitat and threats that face them. And I would propose that threats facing coral reefs are not fisheries that are well managed. They're things like global scale events, climate change, seawater acidification, rising sea surface temperatures, coral bleaching, plastics in the ocean. These are all problems that originate far, far away from the coral reef habitat. And this is yet another way to raise awareness about coral reefs and the impacts that we're having on them. Well, I can speak from my personal experience that when I was a kid, there was nothing more fun than going down to the beach, catching a few fish in a tide pool, bringing them home with me and putting them in an aquarium, taking care of them, feeding them, reading about them in books, learning about them. It really was the catalyst for sort of a marine science education. Not something you could take as far as you want to or not. I mean, you could just keep the fish in a tank, or in my case, it drew me to larger and larger aquaria to the point where you can't keep them in your house, and so you seek out the nearest public aquarium. Public aquaria, really, they're about fishes, they're about biology, but really they're educational institutions. You can go to a public aquarium, you can take away as much or as little as you want from it, and it could propel you into a career in marine sciences.
The controversy over aquarium fishing in Hawaii has gone on for 40 years. There have been numerous attempts to ban aquarium fishing through legislative action, and they've been defeated over many years. Act 306 finally brought together key representatives to develop a robust management plan for West Hawaii aquarium fishery with substantial community input and support. And data from 8,512 DLNR surveys from 1999 through 2018 have conclusively demonstrated the West Hawaii aquarium fishery is sustainable. Conclusion, Hawaii has a well-managed, intensively studied, sustainable aquarium fishery lauded as one of the best managed coral reef fisheries in the world. And I should be able to say the end, but not. Here's the rest of the story. Enter Renee Umberger and Robert Winkner, aka Snorkel Bob, and their organization For the Fishes. I may say there may be a representative of this organization here today, so listen up. Their mission is, through consumer education, scientific research, I have yet to see that, but scientific research and advocacy, we work to reduce the demand for coral reef fish and other tropical wildlife that have been captured unsustainably from the wild for display in saltwater aquariums. And the capture of fish and other wildlife for display in personal aquariums is one of the biggest threats to coral reefs in tropical Pacific waters. Never mind global warming and the rest of that. Umberger and Winkner have saturated the media and public meetings with their own alternative facts and inflammatory rhetoric, such as calling the aquarium fish trade wildlife trafficking. Trafficking is the trade in endangered and threatened species that are protected. None of our fish are endangered or threatened, and it's all perfectly legal, but nonetheless, it's inflammatory language, but it works, calling it wildlife trafficking. They claim there's been a 70 to 90% decline in yellow tangs despite what you saw. They also claim that fish collecting has caused coral reef degradation. There are studies to the contrary. And that some reef fish assemblages have collapsed and endemic species are disappearing. I know of no data to that effect. They make these statements without any foundation from scientifically gathered data. In fact, the published data that do exist completely contradict these claims. Their comments are specifically designed to elicit a strong negative and emotional response from their audience towards aquarium fish collectors. So thank you very much for your concern and attention. I hope in the not too distant future this issue will be resolved and this well-managed fishery can resume. Thank you.